Welcome to CozySideAudio, where every story pulls you deeper. If you like the thrill, the mystery, and the chase, like, share, and subscribe before the next clue disappears.
CozySideAudio presents The Afterlight. Don't Go Out at Dark. Chapter 1. Morning begins the way it always does in Harrow Creek, with a hush so absolute it feels alive. The sun lifts over the skeletal hills like a reluctant witness, spilling pale gold across the town's rusted rooftops. The air hangs motionless, thick with dust and the scent of old wood. Every house bears the same look, windows sealed with layered film, doors padded at the edges, curtains drawn even in daylight. Only a few are occupied, though no one can tell which ones until morning, when the chimneys breathe faint gray smoke. It's the smoke that says who's still alive. Junie steps onto the porch barefoot, careful to let the screen door whisper shut behind her. She stands still, eyes half closed, as if listening for something, but all she hears is the hum of sunlight on metal. The world hums differently now. The birds that once woke the town are gone. The crickets, too. The air itself seems tired of making sound. Her brother Mixon sits cross-legged at the bottom of the steps, his tongue peeking between his teeth as he draws. He's 8, with a head full of wild curls and a habit of squinting like he's always looking into some private distance no one else can see. A battered sketchbook rests in his lap, pages fluttering faintly in the morning draft. He's using the stub of a charcoal pencil, one of the few things Junie lets him waste freely. "What are you drawing now?" she asks, kneeling beside him. He tilts the page so she can see. The drawing shows a dark shape, long and fluid, like smoke that's forgotten which way is up. Around it are streaks of pale light, radiating in thin, uneven lines. "It's how they look," he says softly, "when I close my eyes." Junie feels a chill crawl along her arms despite the heat. She smiles anyway. "You don't know how they look, dummy. You've never seen them." "I've seen the dark," he says, as if that's the same thing. He's not wrong. Everyone in Harrow Creek has seen the dark, the kind that moves when you blink, that breathes when you stop breathing, the kind that waits. She tousles his hair and stands. "Keep it to daylight drawings, okay? Mom doesn't like when you fill those pages with weird things." He nods absently, smearing charcoal along his cheek. She watches him for a moment longer, the smallness of him in the vast, still yard, the way his bare feet tap against the sun-warmed steps. He hums tunelessly as he works. Junie catches herself listening to the sound like someone checking a pulse to make sure it's still safe to be alive. Harrow Creek sits at the bottom of what used to be a mining valley, surrounded by slopes of ochre dirt and pine skeletons. The mine's closed after the Nightfall event, though the old shafts still gape open in the hillsides like wounds that never healed. Nobody talks much about what happened back then, not in words longer than a whisper. But everyone remembers the night the sky went black, not just clouded, not eclipsed, but gone, as if light itself had been switched off, and from that blackness came the sound. People said it was like thunder underwater, like 100 voices humming at once. Some said it was the earth crying out. When the power grids burned out and the lights died, the creatures came. Blind, drawn by light and sound, they swept through towns like wind through tall grass, leaving silence behind them. That was 9 years ago. The world learned to live by new rules. The daylight law. No sound after dusk. No lights of any kind. No one outside once the sun touches the ridge. Those who forget don't survive to be reminded. Junie heads down the narrow road toward the square. The streets are layered in fine dust, marked by wheel ruts that have been there for years. The storefronts are boarded up: the grocery, the hardware store, even the diner that once served pies and trucker coffee around the clock. Someone has scrawled faded white paint across the diner's roof. Harrow Creek still here. The letters have peeled so the phrase reads like a question. There are people moving quietly through the light, a handful of survivors doing their routines as if the world had only slowed down, not ended. Mr. Delaney, the old farmer, pushes a wheelbarrow of corn husks down Main. Miss Cora sits outside her general store with a bowl of beans, shelling in total silence, the rhythmic flick of her hands echoing faintly against the wood. Every gesture is cautious, rehearsed. People measure noise like they measure water in strict, necessary doses. Junie passes them with a polite nod. No one speaks unless they have to. Even greetings are mouthed, not said. She reaches the edge of the square where the old clock tower stands, its hands frozen at 9:17, the time of the event, some say. Others insist it stopped hours later when the last town siren wailed and the first creature arrived. Either way, it's the town's monument now. Someone planted flowers at its base, pale ghost petals that grow only in shade. They sway faintly, though there's no breeze. Junie kneels, straightens a few petals, then looks out over the empty streets. Sometimes she imagines she can hear the echoes of what used to be the rumble of cars, laughter spilling from the diner, her father's voice calling Mixon home at dusk. But those sounds belong to another life. They can't come back. At midday, she and Mixon walk to the riverbank where the sunlight glints on the shallows. The river used to be a bright, laughing thing. Now it moves slow and heavy, thick with silt, carrying reflections of ruined buildings in its surface. Still, it's the one place where you can almost forget. They sit on the edge of the old dock. Junie dangles her feet over the side. Mixon tosses pebbles and watches the ripples spread. Their reflections shimmer, distorted two ghosts pretending to be alive. "Why's the water brown?" Mixon asks. "It's not dirty," Junie says. "It's just tired." He seems to accept that. He pulls out his sketchbook again, drawing the curve of the riverbank, the half-collapsed bridge in the distance. His drawings are always accurate, frighteningly so. When he draws a thing, it looks older, truer, as if he sees the bones beneath it. "Do you remember before?" he asks suddenly. "Before what?" "Before the dark." Junie hesitates. "A little. I was younger than you are now when it started." "Was it loud?" She almost laughs, then realizes he's serious. "Yeah, loud in good ways. Cars, music, wind through trees. You'd wake up to birds. They'd sing right outside your window." He stares at the water. "Why'd they stop?" "Because the night scared them away, I guess." He nods thoughtfully. "Maybe they're waiting, like everyone else." The afternoon light grows heavier, orange at the edges. Junie knows they should head back soon. Her mother hates when they cut it close. The daylight law isn't just habit, it's survival. The town goes still an hour before sunset. Doors bolted, lamps snuffed, streets deserted. They've all heard what happens if you break curfew. Sometimes, on windless nights, faint vibrations run through the ground. You can feel them in your bones, like the earth itself is holding its breath. Some say that's the creatures feeding on sound, on movement, on the memory of noise. Others say it's just the earth remembering the hum. Junie doesn't know what she believes, but she's seen enough aftermaths to know the rules aren't worth testing. She helps Mixon pack his sketches into his satchel. They walk home slowly, the sunlight slanting long and low across the road. The mountains catch fire at their peaks, crimson and gold. Somewhere in the distance, a metal roof creaks, echoing too loud both of them freeze. The sound fades. They wait a long moment before moving again. When they reach their house, her mother is already on the porch. A thin figure in a shawl, eyes shadowed with fatigue. She doesn't scold, just gestures sharply. Inside now, they obey. Dinner is quiet canned beans, flatbread, a few slices of dried apple. The room smells of oil and old wood. Their house is small, only 3 rooms, walls padded with rugs to muffle footsteps. Every window has heavy curtains. The only light comes from a cracked skylight that catches the last gold before dusk. Junie watches it fade as she eats, counting the minutes until the color drains from the world. Her mother moves methodically, cleaning, securing the door bolts, checking the sound traps, little bells strung on threads across windows. If any creature tries to force its way in, the vibration will alert them. Not that there's much they could do. Mixon sits by the table, staring at his sketchbook again. The page glows faintly where sunlight hits it. Junie leans closer. He's drawn something new. Not one of the long, shadowy figures this time, but the town itself, houses in rows, smoke rising, mountains behind. And in the sky above it all, a great ring of darkness, like an eclipse that never ends. She touches the corner of the page. "What's that?" "The sun they took," he says simply. Her mother stops moving for the first time. Junie can feel her staring. "Mixon," she says quietly, "don't talk like that." "But it's true," he insists. "You said the light went out that night." Maybe they needed it more than we did. Her mother's voice trembles. Enough. Junie shoots her brother a look, mouthing, "Stop." He shrugs, confused by the fear in the room. They finish eating in silence. The last rays vanish through the skylight, and the air grows cool. Somewhere beyond the hills, the first low hum rises faint, distant, like a whale song buried in the earth. Junie feels it in her teeth. Her mother stands still, listening. Then she moves through the house, extinguishing every lamp, every candle. She gestures for them to do the same. The house darkens until it's nothing but shapes in deeper shades of gray. The night begins. No one sleeps easily in Harrow Creek. People lie awake, listening. The silence outside is deceptive. The world hums underneath it. The creatures don't make sound. Not the way animals do, they make absence, pulling the air tight around them, turning sound into weight. Sometimes Junie thinks she can sense them brushing against the edge of perception, their blind faces turned toward the faintest heartbeat. She holds Mixon close, both of them lying still on their mattress. His breathing steadies her, slow and warm against her shoulder. But when the hum deepens, she feels his body stiffen. "Junie?" he whispers, so soft she almost doesn't hear. They're singing again. Her stomach knots. "Go to sleep." He shakes his head. They sing to the dark. That's how it knows where to go. "Stop talking." "They're looking for something," he murmurs. "They're looking for us." She covers his mouth gently, whispering, "Hush." The word feels dangerous in the air, as if even that small sound might draw attention. For a long time they lie awake, eyes open in the dark, waiting for the hum to pass. At dawn, the light returns pale and cold. Junie wakes to find Mixon already up, sitting by the curtained window, sketchbook open again. The lines he's drawn are strange circles intersecting, pulsing shapes like ripples in water. "What's that supposed to be?" she asks groggily. He looks at her with solemn eyes far too old for him. "The sound," he says. "It's getting closer." She rubs her eyes, trying to shake off the dreamlike fear that clings to her. Outside, the world glows with that fragile, deceptive calm, the same every morning, the same promise that nothing has changed. But something in the air feels different. The silence is heavier. The light tastes brittle, sharp on her tongue. She doesn't know it yet. But this is the last normal morning they'll ever have. Chapter 2. The heat lay thick over Harrow Creek that afternoon, the kind of dry, humming heat that seemed to flatten every sound and bleach the world of color. Junie kicked a rock along the cracked asphalt, watching it skip between faded yellow lines as she walked beside Izzy. The road wound through the heart of town, what was left of it anyway. Once, Harrow Creek had been alive, a mining town with a school, 2 diners, and a main street lined with shop fronts painted in cheerful pastels. Now it was all rust and dust and sagging signs. The air smelled faintly of old earth, the scent that never quite left after the mines went bad. "Remember the parades?" Izzy asked. Junie snorted. "Barely." "No, I mean really remember them. The floats, the marching band, that dumb little Ferris wheel they'd haul out by the creek every spring." "Sure," Junie said, smiling a little. "And the funnel cakes that tasted like burned air." Izzy chuckled. "Yeah, and the fireworks." That made them both fall silent. No one had seen fireworks since the Nightfall event. The idea of explosions and light in the dark now felt like madness. The road dipped near what used to be the grocery store. Its windows were boarded over, and the once colorful mural of a sunrise now peeled in long, curling strips. A crow cawed from somewhere above, startlingly loud in the heavy stillness. "Feels like the world's holding its breath," Izzy said. Junie adjusted the strap of her satchel. "It always does this time of day. Like it knows night's coming." They both laughed softly at that nervous sound, more habit than humor. Down the next street, Mixon was waiting for them. He stood on the curb, staring toward the ridgeline where the old mine entrances were hidden behind a curtain of pines. His small frame looked even smaller against the endless horizon of dust and silence. "Mixon," Junie called, waving. He turned but didn't move. His hair stuck up in messy tufts, and his bare knees were streaked with dirt. He was holding something in his hands, a little wind-up soldier missing one arm. Izzy nudged Junie. Kid's been staring that way all day again? Yeah, Junie said. Mom says he dreams about them, the mines. Says they whisper to him. Izzy frowned. You shouldn't say stuff like that out loud. Junie shrugged. It's just talk. But she knew it wasn't. Not really. They reached Mixon, and Junie crouched beside him. Hey, Bug, you okay? He didn't look at her. His eyes were fixed on the mountains, unblinking. They're calling again, he said softly. Junie's chest tightened. Who's calling? The ones in the dark. Izzy exchanged a quick glance with Junie. Mixon, nobody's calling. It's just the wind. The boy shook his head. It's not the wind. You can't hear it right now because they're quiet. But when the air gets heavy... He trailed off, his voice dropping to a whisper. They hum. A shiver ran through Junie despite the heat. She rose and put a hand on his shoulder. Come on, let's get you home. They walked in silence for a while. A breeze kicked up, carrying with it a fine layer of dust that shimmered in the sunlight like ash. The sound of the wind through the hollowed buildings made the whole town sigh. Junie tried to focus on the road, but her brother's words echoed in her mind. They're calling again. The phrase stuck there, like a splinter. As they passed the edge of the old park, now just a patch of dead grass and a rusted jungle gym, Izzy said quietly, You ever hear it? What he's talking about? No, Junie said. Not really, just sometimes at night, I feel like the house hums, like it's vibrating a little, but maybe it's just my heartbeat. Izzy kicked at the dirt. Maybe it's the power grid, or the wind through the tunnels. Or maybe it's nothing, Junie said quickly, as though the words themselves could close a door. They stopped at the edge of the main square. The fountain there hadn't run in years, its basin full of leaves and murky rainwater. Someone had strung old wind chimes from a nearby lamppost, bits of metal and glass that clinked in the faintest breeze. The sound was fragile, like the memory of laughter. Mixon sat on the fountain's edge, running his fingers through the dusty water. His reflection rippled, fractured by floating debris. You know, Izzy said, sometimes I think the town itself is haunted. Junie gave her a side look. Haunted? Not by ghosts, by the way things used to be, like everything's stuck between living and dying. Junie smiled faintly. You've been reading too much old poetry again. Hey, we only get so many books that survived. A girl's got to do something while hiding from monsters. Their laughter this time was a little more genuine, the kind that comes from pretending everything's still normal, if only for a second. Then, as if the world wanted to remind them it wasn't, a sound rolled through the air. It wasn't loud, but it was deep a vibration more than a noise, so low it seemed to move through the bones rather than the ears. It came from the direction of the mines. Junie froze. Izzy's eyes widened. Even the wind chimes fell silent. Mixon slowly lifted his head. There, he whispered. You hear it? Junie's pulse quickened. It's just... They're calling again. His voice was small, reverent almost. The hum grew stronger, thrumming through the ground. The water in the fountain trembled, tiny concentric ripples forming outward from where Mixon's hand rested. Izzy took a step back. That's not the wind, June. I know, Junie whispered. The hum lasted maybe 15 seconds, long enough for the hairs on their arms to rise, long enough for their shadows to shake faintly on the concrete. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum that pressed against their skulls. Mixon let out a small breath. They stopped, he said. Junie knelt beside him again. Mixon, what do you mean they? He turned toward her finally, eyes huge and glassy. The ones underground. They get lonely when the sun's up. They want to come out. Izzy's mouth opened, but no words came. Junie swallowed hard. We're going home. Now. They took the long way back, avoiding the creek path that ran close to the forest. Every shadow looked darker than it should have. Every crow's call a little too human. By the time they reached the neighborhood, the light had turned amber that fragile hour when the sun began its slow retreat and the world seemed to hold its breath. Curtains were already being drawn in every house they passed. The people of Harrow Creek didn't need clocks. They could feel when dusk was coming. Izzy peeled off toward her own home, promising to stop by tomorrow. Junie took Mixon's hand and led him up their porch steps. The boards creaked beneath their feet. Inside, their mother sat by the window, sewing by the last of the daylight. She looked up as they entered. "You two were gone a while." "Just walking," Junie said. "The roads are clear today." Her mother's eyes flicked to Mixon. "You keep him away from the ridgeline?" "Yes, Mom." Her mother's needle paused mid-stitch. "Good. That place is cursed." Mixon climbed onto the couch, hugging his knees. "It's not cursed," he murmured. "They just want to come home." The needle froze. The room seemed to contract around the sound of his voice. Junie forced a laugh, too high-pitched. "He's just been playing pretend again." Her mother said nothing, just went back to her sewing, though the thread trembled slightly in her hand. That night, as Junie lay in bed, she couldn't sleep. The heat hadn't broken even after sunset, and the air felt thick enough to drink. Crickets chirped faintly outside, but beneath that, she thought she could hear it again, a vibration low and steady, like a pulse buried beneath the world. She rolled over, pulling the blanket tighter, telling herself it was nothing. The house creaked, settling. A dog barked once, far away. But when she finally began to drift, a sound came from down the hall, a whisper so soft it almost wasn't there. "Junie." Her eyes snapped open. She sat up. "Mixon?" No answer. She swung her legs out of bed, feet touching the cold floorboards. The moonlight through her window drew a faint silver path toward the door. She followed it, her heart pounding in her throat. Mixon's door was slightly open. She pushed it gently. He was sitting by the window, wide awake, staring toward the mountains. The faintest smile ghosted across his face. "They're still calling," he said, voice dreamy. Junie's breath hitched. "Mixon, go back to bed." He didn't move. His reflection in the window looked strange, his eyes too dark, too wide, like pools swallowing the faint light. She crossed the room, took him by the shoulders and guided him back to bed. His skin was clammy. "Promise me you'll stay inside," she whispered. He nodded, though she could tell he wasn't really listening. Junie sat there beside him long after his breathing evened out. Outside, the hum began again, distant but steady, a subterranean heartbeat that seemed to sync with her own. And somewhere deep in the earth beneath Harrow Creek, something stirred. Chapter 3. The afternoon begins with light, soft, diluted sunlight that turns the dirt roads of Harrow Creek the color of faded parchment. Junie's hands sting faintly from the cold water she's been wringing through the laundry basin. The metal tub beside her hums faintly with the wind, and she can hear the rhythmic clack of clothespins as she works. The air smells of damp cotton, rust, and the faint sweetness of honeysuckle that still clings stubbornly to the side fence, though nothing has truly thrived here since the event. She glances over at the yard where Mixon is kicking a battered red rubber ball, the same one they've patched with tape so many times it looks more gray than red. He's humming to himself, off-key but happy, the way only an 8-year-old can be unself-conscious, utterly in his own little world. Junie smiles despite herself. For a moment, the illusion holds. The sun feels warm on her neck, the breeze soft, and there's no trace of the hollow quiet that grips Harrow Creek after dusk, that silence so complete it presses on the lungs. "Don't go too close to the fence, Mix," she calls over, twisting a shirt between her palms. "You know what Mom said." "I'm not," he says, not looking up. He gives the ball a harder kick and it thuds against the warped boards, bouncing back crookedly. The fence beyond the yard separates their property from an overgrown lot. It used to belong to the Johnson family before they packed up and left, abandoning everything. Now, weeds have swallowed the place, waist-high tangles of dead grass, collapsed furniture, the occasional glint of glass catching the sun. Junie squints toward it uneasily. The way the tall weeds move in the wind always looks like something breathing. She shakes the thought off, pinning another shirt to the line. Inside, through the open window, she can hear the soft hum of the radio, the government frequency that runs all day now, repeating the same handful of messages. Keep all activity limited to daylight hours. Maintain silence during twilight transition. Avoid bright light exposure at night. Report sightings to local authorities. The voice is calm, monotone, bureaucratic. No one listens anymore. Everyone knows the rules by heart. She hums quietly to herself as she moves down the line. It's so easy to pretend in these last golden hours. that life could still be normal. Izzy had left a little while ago, promising to bring back some bread from the co-op. There's only one working oven left in town, powered by a jerry-rigged solar array. Izzy helps there some days, saying she likes the smell of baking, that it feels human. Junie admires that about her. Izzy can still find fragments of the old world in the ashes of this one. Junie herself just tries to hold what she has left together. She glances back to Mixon again. He's talking quietly to himself now, crouched down, tracing something in the dirt with a stick. He does that, sometimes writes little symbols or patterns, then smudges them out again before anyone can see. Junie used to think he was pretending to be one of those scientists from before, mapping things, drawing plans. Lately, though, she's noticed a different look in his eyes when he does it, a kind of dreamy focus, like he's listening to something. She wipes her hands on her jeans and takes a step toward him. "Mixon, what you doing?" He doesn't answer. The ball rolls slightly, nudged by the breeze. She sees, for just an instant, the way he's drawn circles and lines overlapping like ripples, and something like an eye in the center. Then he looks up at her, startled, and wipes it away with his sleeve. "Nothing," he says. "Just playing." Junie frowns. "Okay, just stay where I can see you, all right?" He nods and goes back to his ball. The wind shifts. It carries a strange, hollow sound, with it something distant, like a door being dragged open in the earth. Junie straightens slowly. Her first thought is thunder, but the sky is cloudless. The sound comes again low, almost imperceptible, like a note played deep underground. It feels alive. Mixon stops moving. The ball rolls gently to a stop at his feet. He turns toward the overgrown lot, head tilted slightly, listening. Then he whispers, just loud enough for Junie to hear. They're calling again. A chill moves down her spine. "Mixon?" But he doesn't respond. His eyes are glassy, reflecting the slanted sunlight, his mouth slightly open like he's hearing something she can't. "Mixon, come here." "Nothing." Then the ball jerks, caught by the wind or gravity, and rolls away from him toward the fence. He follows it instinctively. "Mixon!" Junie drops the damp shirt, clothespins scattering, and runs toward him. The ball bounces once against the boards and slips through a narrow gap, rolling into the tangle of weeds on the other side. Mixon reaches for it. Junie grabs his wrist just before he slips through the fence. "Don't," she says, breathless. "I mean it. You can't go in there." He blinks at her like he's waking from a dream. "But I heard." "Stop. You didn't hear anything. You stay out of that lot, Mixon. Understand?" He nods reluctantly, but his eyes linger on the weeds, the fence, the way the grass sways like it's whispering. Junie pulls him back toward the house, not letting go. By the time they reach the porch, the sound is gone. Only the faint creak of the laundry line and the dry buzz of cicadas remain. That night, Junie can't sleep. She sits by the window, the old flashlight on the sill, though she doesn't dare switch it on. The moonlight paints everything in shades of gray-blue. Mixon is asleep in the next room, murmuring softly. Every few minutes, he says a name she can't quite make out, something that sounds like Eris, or Eris, whispered as if in prayer. Junie presses her fingers against the glass, staring at the yard. The ball is gone. She tells herself she'll find it in the morning. She tells herself there's nothing out there. But somewhere deep in the night, she thinks she hears that same low hum again, coming from far away, down past the mines, where the earth itself seems to breathe. By morning, the feeling hasn't gone. Izzy shows up at the door, carrying a loaf of bread wrapped in a towel. Her dark curls are damp with sweat, and there's flour dusted across her forearms. "You look like you didn't sleep," she says, stepping inside. "I didn't," Junie admits. "Weird noises again?" "Yeah? What kind?" "Like a hum from the mine direction." Izzy makes a face. "I thought they sealed that place off." "They did, but I heard it." Mixon wanders in from the kitchen, hair sticking up, rubbing his eyes. "They were calling," he says matter-of-factly, as if continuing a conversation. Izzy freezes, looking between them. "Who's calling?" "The ones in the ground," Mixon says simply. "They hum when the sun's low, but they can't see in the light. They're scared of it. "Mixin," Junie starts. He shrugs and takes a bite of bread, unconcerned. Izzy gives Junie a long look. Neither of them speaks. The day unfolds quietly, as most days do. Izzy helps repair the solar panels on the roof, while Junie tends the garden's stunted vegetables, thin carrots, some beans that haven't wilted yet. It feels almost peaceful until late afternoon, when the light begins to soften again. Mixon is outside, rolling a different ball smaller, blue, cracked from age. Junie watches him from the porch, telling herself it's fine. But she can't shake the unease. The shadows stretch long across the yard, the air thick with that amber, dying glow that comes just before dusk. She turns to take the laundry off the line. The wind picks up. A flicker of movement catches her eye. The ball rolls again too far, too fast, bouncing once, twice, then slipping under the fence. "Mixon, stay there!" she shouts. But he's already running after it. For a second, his small figure is silhouetted against the fading sun hair bright, arms swinging. Then he vanishes into the tall weeds. Junie's heart lurches. "Mixon!" She drops everything and sprints toward the fence, stumbling over the uneven ground. The world feels suddenly too quiet. Even the cicadas stop. "Mixon, answer me." No reply. The gap in the fence yawns dark and jagged. Junie pushes through, scraping her arm on the wood. The lot smells of rot and old metal. The weeds are taller than her knees, rustling like whispers. "Mixon!" She searches, breath coming in ragged bursts. The sky above her is dimming fast, sunlight thinning to threads. The ball lies ahead, caught in a patch of weeds. She runs to it, snatches it up, but Mixon isn't there. "Mixon!" she screams again, louder now. The echo of her voice dies quickly. She spins in circles, scanning the lot, the broken shed near the far end, the twisted shapes of furniture and debris. Nothing. Her stomach knots. The light is fading too fast. She's still shouting his name when she hears a door slam somewhere behind her neighbors, locking up, the signal that night is coming. "Junie!" someone yells from a porch down the street. "Get inside now!" But she can't. "Mixon!" The sun is a bleeding orange line now, almost gone. She feels something stir in the weeds nearby, a faint shift of air, a sound too soft to be footsteps. Her breath catches. For one impossible heartbeat, she swears she hears him a whisper, so faint it could be memory. "June." Then the darkness deepens. And the world goes utterly, perfectly silent. Junie doesn't remember running home, not really. She only knows she ends up on the porch, gasping, her arms scraped, the ball still clutched in her hands. Her mother bursts out the door, frantic, pulling her inside. "What happened? Where's Mixon?" Junie can't answer. She just shakes her head. Outside, the last light dies. The street beyond their windows dissolves into blackness, the kind that swallows everything. The shutters slam. The house falls silent except for the sound of Junie's ragged breathing. And somewhere far away, faint but unmistakable, comes that same subterranean hum, rising and falling like a heartbeat buried in the earth. Chapter 4. The morning after Mixon disappears dawns without birdsong. The light feels colder, the air heavier. Harrow Creek always wakes slow, but today the silence feels like something else, a held breath stretched too long. Junie stands by the window, arms wrapped around herself, watching the pale sunlight creep over the roofs. Her eyes are red-rimmed, her throat raw from screaming through the night. She doesn't remember falling asleep, only waking to the thin gray of dawn and realizing it hadn't been a nightmare. Mixon is gone. Her mother is still sitting at the kitchen table, unmoving. She hasn't said a word since the sun went down, just stares at the cup of tea in front of her, long gone cold. Izzy is there too, pacing near the door, backpack slung over one shoulder. "The marshal's organizing a search," she says, voice tight. "We should go." Junie nods mechanically. Her body moves before her mind catches up coat, boots, braid. She catches her reflection briefly in the cracked hallway mirror and almost doesn't recognize herself. Her face looks thinner somehow, sharper, as if something inside her hollowed out overnight. They step outside into a street, already stirring with uneasy movement. People are emerging from their homes, blinking in the light, clutching bags, sticks, tools, anything that might serve as a weapon or lantern. No one carries flashlights. They've all learned what light does at night. A handful of solar-powered trucks idle near the square, the engines whispering. The vehicles look like relics from another life, patched together with scavenged parts and desperation. Marshal Darren stands at the center of it all, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the same dust-colored duster he's worn since before the event. His face is weathered, lines carved deep around his eyes. When he looks up and sees Junie, something like pity flickers there, and it makes her want to hit him. He tips his hat slightly. Junie, Izzy. Junie's voice scrapes out like sand. We're coming with you. Search parties for trained volunteers, Darren says evenly. We don't need more folks getting lost. He's my brother, Junie says. I know, but the sun's already climbing and we only get so many hours of light. You stay here. We'll check the lots, the creek bed, out to the ridge road. If there's anything to find... There is, she cuts in. He didn't just vanish. Something in her tone makes the nearby chatter die. People glance away, uncomfortable. Darren sighs, rubbing the bridge of his nose. All right, you can join the East group. Stay close to daylight markers and don't wander. Understood? Junie nods sharply. Izzy squeezes her shoulder once, quietly supportive, and they move to join the small cluster of volunteers. Most of them are older faces carved by sun and loss. There's Mrs. Dunley from the co-op, her hands shaking as she grips a walking stick. Mr. Haver, whose daughter disappeared 2 years ago and never came back. They all wear the same expression, cautious hope. The search begins. They move through Harrow Creek's East End, the neighborhood that used to buzz with laughter and summer barbecues. Now it's a graveyard of houses. Grass grows through cracks in the asphalt. Paint peels from door frames like shedding skin. The windows are black mirrors reflecting nothing. Junie steps carefully, eyes scanning every shadow, every overturned toy, every rusted swing swaying in the wind. Mixon, she calls, voice cracking. Mixon, it's me. Answer me if you can hear. Only the wind replies, sighing through the hollow yards. A few others join her calls, their voices overlapping a sad chorus of names swallowed by silence. Izzy keeps close beside her. She carries a metal pipe as a walking stick, tapping it lightly every few steps, the rhythm steady, grounding. They pass the lot where Mixon vanished. The grass still lies trampled, a faint path leading deeper into the overgrowth. Junie kneels, brushing her fingers through the dirt. There's a print. Small, bare, hers or his, she can't tell. Her throat tightens. Do you think they'll find anything? Izzy asks quietly. Junie doesn't answer. She stands and keeps walking. By midday, the searchers have split into smaller groups. Darren calls out orders, marking areas on an old map. We sweep to the mines by 2 o'clock, then back before dusk. No exceptions. The light doesn't wait for us. His words carry weight, the kind that comes from too many lost people. Junie glances toward the horizon where the hills rise like dark ribs against the sky. Beyond them lie the mines, the place no one goes anymore, the place where the world first changed. A memory flashes. She and Mixon sitting on the porch as children, their father pointing out toward the ridge. That's where it started, he'd said softly. They drilled too deep, opened something that wasn't supposed to be open. Their father had disappeared during the early days of the event. The official story said he was helping evacuate workers. Junie had never believed it. Now the thought of the mines makes her skin crawl. The sun hangs high and unforgiving when they reach the creek bed. The water has long since dried up, leaving only cracked mud and bones of fish that never found their way out. Junie jumps down into the basin, scanning the ground. Something catches her eye, a scrap of color half buried in the dust. She crouches, heart thudding, and pulls it free. It's a piece of paper, torn and smudged with dirt, the edge of one of Mixon's sketches. The same looping circles and faint, uneven lines, drawn in pencil. A shape like an eye sits at the center. Junie, Izzy calls from above. She holds it up wordlessly. Izzy drops down beside her, eyes wide. Is that? It's his, Junie says, voice trembling. He had this one in his notebook. Then he was here, after sunset. Junie nods, gripping the paper like it might vanish if she loosens her hold. Something inside her shifts a spark, faint but fierce. He's alive, she whispers. He's out there. Izzy looks uneasy. Junie, no one lasts after dark out here. You know that. Junie turns to her, eyes blazing. Then we'll be the first. They bring the paper back to Darren, who studies it with a weary expression. It's a drawing, he says. Could have blown here days ago. No, Junie insists. It's fresh. Look at the edges, not weathered. He dropped it last night. Darren hesitates. The other searchers hover nearby, watching. Finally, he exhales. Even if that's true, Junie, we can't go farther today. The sun's already halfway down. We'll lose the light. So you're just stopping? That's it? We'll continue tomorrow. Tomorrow? She laughs bitterly. He's 8 years old. You think he's just sitting out there waiting for us to come back? Darren's face hardens. I think if we go out after dark, we'll lose more than one child. The unspoken word hangs between them creatures. Everyone has their own name for them. Nightborn, Shades, Howlers. No one's ever seen them clearly enough to know what they truly look like. Only the aftermaths, claw marks on metal, torn fences, the way sound vanishes right before they come. Junie swallows back her anger, but it burns hot in her chest. You can stay here, she says finally, but I'm not done. Darren's hand closes on her shoulder. You go wandering after sundown, you won't be coming back. Don't make your mother bury another child. She jerks free. Then maybe she won't have to. She storms off before he can answer. Izzy follows, muttering an apology to the marshal. The two girls walk back through the dead streets, neither speaking for a long time. The air has that late-day stillness again, heavy with heat and the faint buzzing of distant insects. When they finally reach Junie's porch, she sits down hard on the steps, staring at the horizon. Izzy sits beside her. You meant what you said, didn't you? Junie nods. I saw that drawing. It's proof. Izzy picks at a splinter on the railing. What if the marshal's right? What if... Don't, Junie says sharply. Don't say it. Izzy exhales slowly. Okay, but if you're going to keep looking, you're not doing it alone. Junie glances over. Izzy's eyes are steady, full of something equal parts fear and loyalty. Thanks, Junie says quietly. They sit there as the light fades, watching the world turn gold, then amber, then violet. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wails the nightly curfew call. Doors slam, bolts slide into place. Harrow Creek begins its ritual of survival. Junie's mother calls her name from inside, voice trembling. Coming, Junie says, though her heart is already elsewhere out beyond the ridge, where the sun bleeds into shadow and the earth hums faintly like something alive. That night, Junie dreams of light. It seeps through cracks in the ground, pulsing softly like veins beneath skin. She hears Mixon's voice, faint and echoing. Follow the light. It's safe here. But when she reaches for it, the glow flickers, and something else moves in the dark. Its shape wrong. It's breathing too fast. She wakes before she can see it. Morning comes pale and brittle. The official search has ended. Darren posts a notice on the co-op board. Search concluded. No signs found. Victim presumed lost. The word victim makes Junie's stomach twist. When she tears the notice down, no one stops her. No one even looks. People avoid her eyes now. Some murmur condolences. Others cross the street. Loss has made everyone superstitious. Grief feels contagious here. At home, her mother barely eats. She moves through the rooms like a ghost. Junie can't stand it, the stillness, the pity, the quiet surrender. She finds Izzy that afternoon by the old water tower, where the view stretches all the way to the mines. They called it off, she says. I figured. Junie's jaw tightens. Then we start our own. Izzy stares at her for a long moment, then nods. All right. Where? Junie unfolds Mixon's torn drawing. The faint eye symbol stares back at them, lines branching outward like roots or rivers. "Here," Junie says, pointing to the center. "He drew this near the creek. Whatever he saw, whatever called him, it came from the direction of the mines." Izzy's expression darkens. "You really think he made it that far?" "I think he was trying to lead us there." Izzy sighs. "We can only go during the day." Junie's eyes drift toward the horizon. "Then we start at dawn." As they walk home, the wind shifts again, carrying that low, familiar hum. Fainter this time, but unmistakable. It rises and falls like breathing, like something deep beneath the town is waking. Junie stops in her tracks, heart pounding. Izzy hears it too. Her eyes widen. "That's it," Junie whispers. "That's what Mixon heard." They stand frozen until the sound fades, swallowed by the rustling grass. When it's gone, the silence feels heavier than before, like the world itself is waiting for them to make the next move. And Junie knows, with a certainty that feels almost holy, that she will. Chapter 5. The town square of Harrow Creek hadn't felt this full in years. Yet even with so many bodies gathered together, it still felt empty, like a husk of something that used to be alive. The pale daylight slid over faces turned downward, eyes avoiding one another as though every glance carried the weight of guilt. The air was heavy with the same stillness that always settled over Harrow Creek after something terrible happened. The silence didn't need to be kept. It was absorbed by the ground, by the ruined buildings, by the bones of the town itself. Junie stood at the far edge of the crowd, her hands trembling inside her jacket pockets. She hadn't wanted to come, but Izzy had made her. "It's for Mixon," she'd said that morning, her voice careful and soft, like someone holding a fragile object. But Junie had known better. The vigil wasn't for Mixon. It was for the town. It was for them to forgive themselves for what they hadn't done for the doors that had stayed locked when she screamed his name into the twilight. They'd built a little platform in front of what used to be the post office, one of the few buildings that hadn't collapsed entirely. Its facade still bore the faint outline of letters long peeled away by wind and time. A handful of candles flickered on the ledge, their flames shivering in the faint breeze, and a child's drawing Mixon's was pinned up beside them. It was one Junie remembered from before the event, a picture of a lake, the sun drawn far too big and bright, the water colored with streaks of glittery blue marker. He'd told her it was Harrow Creek before the monsters made it sick. Now the drawing looked like a lie. Pastor Marin stood at the podium, clearing his throat. His hair had gone almost completely white since nightfall. His sermons, once full of hope and bluster, had become thin things, like threadbare blankets stretched too far over the cold. "We are gathered," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "to remember young Mixon Harper taken from us before his time." Taken? The word carved itself into Junie's ribs. Taken, like he'd just been misplaced, like someone had picked him up off the ground and carried him away, and that was the end of it. Marin continued, his voice flattening into ritual. "We do not know why some are chosen and others spared. We do not question the ways of the world as it is, but we carry on for those who cannot." Junie's nails dug into her palms until she felt the skin break. She wanted to scream at him at all of them. "We don't carry on," she wanted to shout. "We just stop living slower." Around her, people murmured prayers, some crossing themselves, some whispering small mantras learned from other survivors. Her mother stood at the front, a hollow figure wrapped in gray. The candlelight trembled against her face, highlighting the tears that refused to fall. She hadn't spoken much since Mixon's disappearance. Not to Junie, not to anyone. It was as though the moment the sun went down that night, it had taken her voice with it. Izzy stood beside Junie, clutching a wilted bouquet of wildflowers she must have scavenged from the creek's edge. Her eyes darted to Junie every few seconds, searching for some sign permission, maybe to step in, to offer comfort. But Junie couldn't move, couldn't speak. Then Marin said it, the thing that broke her. "He is with the light now," the pastor murmured. "He walks where darkness cannot follow." Junie's breath caught like a knife in her throat. She heard the words echo through the square, through her skull, and for a long moment she couldn't tell if she was still breathing. Then her voice cracked out of her, raw and shaking. "No, he's not." The crowd turned, a ripple of movement breaking the fragile stillness. Marin froze, his mouth half open. You don't know that, Junie went on, her voice shaking. None of you do. You just want to believe it's over because that's easier, isn't it? Junie, Izzy whispered, but she didn't reach out. He's still out there, Junie shouted, stepping forward. He has to be. You're all standing here pretending this is what he'd want. He's 8 years old. He's scared and alone, and you're all lighting candles for him instead of helping me look. The silence that followed was unbearable. It wasn't anger she saw in their faces. It was fear. Fear that if they let themselves believe her, they'd have to act. Marshal Doran, broad-shouldered, his hat shadowing most of his face, finally stepped out from the crowd. His boots crunched on the gravel. Junie, he said quietly, you've done all you can. We all have. Don't, she snapped. Don't say that. You called off the search because you were scared to go out past sundown. You said he was taken by night like that was some kind of rule we all just have to live with. Doran's jaw tensed. You know what happens after dark. I don't care. Junie's voice cracked again, breaking under the weight of her own fury. You don't get to decide when I give up. Her mother finally spoke, so softly it barely reached Junie's ears. Junie, please. Junie turned, the sight of her mother's trembling hands making her chest ache, but the words kept coming, unstoppable now. You're all cowards, she hissed. Every single one of you. You've already buried him because it's easier than hoping. The crowd didn't argue. They just looked away. That was worse. Junie spun on her heel and stormed out of the square, the echo of her footsteps chasing her through the empty streets. The sky was beginning to shift, the slow bleed of afternoon light fading toward gold. She walked until she reached the edge of town, where the last row of houses crumbled into fields of dead grass. Izzy caught up to her eventually, out of breath. You can't keep burning every bridge in this town, she said, panting. We still need them. Junie turned. Do we? They're scared, Junie. So am I. Izzy flinched, but Junie wasn't done. I'm scared every single day, but I still went out there. I still looked. I still believe he's out there, and they've just accepted it. Izzy didn't answer. The wind picked up, carrying dust through the hollow streets. Somewhere a loose shutter clanged against its frame. After a long pause, Izzy said quietly, We'll keep looking. You and me. I promise. Junie stared at her friend, the promise cutting through the static in her head like light through fog. For a moment, she wanted to cry. Instead, she nodded. Okay. They walked back toward the Harper's house as the sun fell lower. The long shadows of broken buildings stretched like black veins across the road. The silence of Harrow Creek deepened with every passing minute, the world holding its breath as the daylight thinned. When they reached the house, Junie's mother was inside, sitting at the kitchen table with an untouched mug of tea. She didn't look up when Junie entered. The room smelled faintly of stale bread and cold ash. The walls, once lined with Mixon's drawings, now felt suffocatingly blank. Junie had taken most of them down after the vigil, unable to stand the way they seemed to watch her. Junie poured water into a glass, her hands still trembling. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears, too loud, too sharp. Every sound in this town seemed amplified since he'd vanished. Even silence had a sound. A low, unending pressure, like something waiting beneath the surface. Izzy lingered by the door. I'll come by tomorrow, she said softly. Early, before sunrise. Why? Because we're not done looking. Junie nodded again, not trusting herself to speak. When Izzy left, the silence pressed in even tighter. Outside, the sky bled orange into purple. Junie watched from the window as the last thin rays of sunlight touched the rooftops and then slipped away. One by one, every light in town went dark just as they always did before true nightfall. But tonight, it felt different. Heavier. She went to Mixon's room, pushing open the door quietly, like she didn't want to disturb him. His bed was still unmade, the blanket twisted from the morning he disappeared. His shoes sat by the wall, one tipped over. The little glass jar of marbles he'd collected, each one glimmering faintly in the dim light, stood untouched on the shelf. Junie sat on the bed and held one of the marbles in her palm, staring at how it caught the light. When she closed her eyes, she could still hear his voice. They're calling again. A chill crawled up her spine. Outside, something groaned distant, but too heavy to be the wind. It echoed through the empty town, low and deep, like the earth itself was exhaling. Junie froze. Every muscle in her body tensed. The sound came again, faint but rhythmic, almost like a pulse, a vibration buried beneath the quiet. Then, as quickly as it had come, it was gone. Junie stood at the window long after the sound faded, staring into the dark fields beyond the town. Her reflection wavered in the glass, pale, haunted eyes over a hollow face. She whispered to it, to herself, to the empty dark beyond, "I'm not giving up on you, Mix." And as if in answer, a flicker of faint blue light rippled in the distance, small, like a firefly, then gone. For the first time in days, Junie felt something that wasn't despair. It was small, fragile, but it was there, hope. And somewhere far beyond the edge of Harrow Creek, in the silence that followed, something stirred something that had been listening all along. Chapter 6. The morning after the vigil broke cold and colorless, a sunless gray pressing down on Harrow Creek like a lid. Even the birds seemed reluctant to stir. The mist hung low over the cracked streets, swallowing rooftops and stretching in ribbons between the skeletal trees that bordered the town. It smelled faintly of wet stone and rust, a scent Junie had come to associate with the world after the Nightfall event. She hadn't slept. The sound from the night before, that deep, pulsing groan beneath the ground, had lingered in her skull long after it faded. When she finally did close her eyes, she saw flashes of blue behind her eyelids, faint veins of light spreading across the dark, like roots. She woke with a start, drenched in sweat, the name Mixon already on her lips. By the time she stepped outside, the mist had thickened to a pale curtain. The street lamps stood useless, hollow relics that hadn't glowed in years. Harrow Creek didn't dare use artificial light anymore, not since it became clear that they could sense it. The creatures that came after the event didn't need eyes. They heard and felt the world through vibration, sound, heat. The stories said they once came out in daylight too, before realizing that the sun drove them mad. Now, only night belonged to them. The air tasted metallic as Junie walked toward the edge of town. Her boots crunched over broken glass and gravel, the sound swallowed almost instantly by the fog. She carried her brother's drawing in her jacket pocket, the one from the vigil. She couldn't bring herself to leave it behind. Izzy was already waiting near the bridge that led over the creek, bundled in 2 layers of torn sweaters. Her breath misted in the cold. "You look like hell," she said softly. Junie managed a half smile. "Didn't sleep much." "Yeah, me neither." They started walking together, their steps slow and deliberate. Beyond the bridge, the town thinned into overgrown lots and half-collapsed houses. Junie always thought this part of Harrow Creek felt like the border between 2 worlds, one still pretending to be human, and one quietly surrendering to something else. "We should start near the storm drains," Junie said. "That's where I found his drawing." Izzy nodded. "You really think there's something down there?" "I don't know," Junie said. "But I heard something last night, like the ground was humming." Izzy frowned. "The hum again?" "Yeah, louder this time." They descended a cracked slope behind what used to be an auto shop. The air grew damp and sour. A rusted grate marked the mouth of the storm drain, half choked with dead leaves and old debris. A trickle of water glistened in the gloom beyond it. Junie crouched, tracing a finger along the concrete. Then she froze. "Look," she whispered. Izzy leaned closer. Faint streaks ran along the wall lines of dull blue light, almost invisible at first glance. They pulsed softly, like veins beneath skin. "Is that afterlight?" Junie said before she could stop herself. The word came unbidden, something she'd heard whispered around town for months. "Afterlight?" Izzy repeated. Junie nodded. "People said it started showing up after the event. Nobody knows what it is. Residue from the creatures, maybe, or something from the mines." The light wasn't steady. It flickered faintly, spreading in spiderweb patterns along the drain, down into darkness. Junie's pulse quickened. She reached out, her fingers hovering just above the glow. It gave off no heat. If anything, the air around it felt colder. Izzy shifted uneasily. "Maybe we shouldn't touch it." Junie hesitated, then brushed the surface with her fingertip. For an instant, she saw something. Not with her eyes, but in her mind a flash of movement, A blur of tunnels and blue light twisting through stone, something vast and living buried beneath the town. It was gone as quickly as it came. She gasped and jerked her hand back. "Junie?" Izzy grabbed her arm. "What happened?" I saw something," Junie whispered, her heart hammering. "It was like the mines. I think it's connected." Izzy stared at her, then back at the glowing wall. "You think Mixon saw this?" Junie pulled the folded drawing from her pocket. She smoothed it out on her knee, holding it up beside the light. The patterns in the sketch, strange looping lines drawn in blue crayon, almost matched the shape of the veins on the concrete. Her throat tightened. "He knew?" "What do you mean?" "Mixon drew this weeks before he disappeared. He said the light was under the ground. He must have seen it somewhere, maybe down in the drains." Izzy exhaled shakily. "So what? You think he followed it?" Junie's eyes met hers. "I think it led him somewhere." They spent the next hour tracing the faint glow along the walls, moving carefully through the drizzle and mist. It wasn't everywhere, just in certain places, like veins running beneath the skin of the town. The light grew stronger near the outskirts, toward the fields that led to the hills. "Toward the mines," Izzy murmured. Junie nodded grimly. "Always toward the mines." They reached a section where the concrete had cracked open from years of rain and frost. Through the fissure, the blue glow shimmered brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. Junie knelt beside it, listening. Beneath the whisper of wind and distant water, she thought she heard the faintest vibration, a hum, low and constant. Izzy crouched beside her. "You hear that too, right?" Junie nodded. "It's the same sound from last night." They followed it up the hill toward an old drainage tunnel near the edge of town. The tunnel entrance was half buried under fallen boards and weeds. Graffiti covered the walls, messages from years ago, warnings scrawled in white paint. "Don't listen to them. They're in the dark. Run while you can." Junie brushed her hand over the faded words. "Somebody tried to tell us." "Yeah," Izzy muttered. "And look how that turned out." Inside, the tunnel was colder still, their breath fogged in the air. Water dripped from the ceiling, echoing like soft footsteps in the dark. Junie used a broken mirror shard to reflect a sliver of daylight deeper into the passage, careful not to use any artificial light. Even that small glimmer was dangerous, but they needed to see. The walls inside were smeared with the same glowing residue. Thick, like veins branching outward. The deeper they went, the brighter it pulsed. "It's everywhere," Izzy whispered. "It's like the town's bleeding this stuff." Junie's stomach twisted. "No, it's like it's alive." They walked in silence for a while, the hum beneath their feet growing louder. Junie felt it in her bones now, a vibration, subtle but steady. It was the same frequency she'd felt when she touched the wall near the creek, like something vast and buried was stirring in its sleep. At one point, they stopped to rest near a bend where the tunnel ceiling had collapsed. Izzy leaned back against the wall, her flashlight unlit but ready in her hand. "You think this is what drove them here?" she asked quietly. "The creatures, I mean." Junie looked at the glowing residue tracing its way through the cracks in the stone. "No, I think they were already here. We just dug too deep." Izzy frowned. "You mean the mines?" "Yeah, remember the stories from the older folks? They said the miners found something down there before nightfall, something that shouldn't have been unearthed." Izzy rubbed her arms, shivering. Maybe that's why they went blind. Maybe they saw something they weren't supposed to. Junie thought of Mixon again, his quiet voice whispering, "They're calling again." "What if the afterlight isn't just residue?" she said. "What if it's a signal?" Izzy looked uneasy. "You mean like communication?" Junie didn't answer. She didn't need to. The hum beneath them seemed to pulse in reply. They left the tunnel just before dusk, emerging into the dying light. The town below looked smaller from this height, its streets like veins branching out from a single heart. The fog had lifted, but only slightly enough for the orange rim of the sun to burn weakly along the horizon. Junie turned back toward the entrance of the tunnel. The faint blue glow still pulsed deep inside, rhythmic, patient. "We have to go to the mines," she said finally. Izzy's head snapped toward her. "Junie, no. That's suicide. Mixon's drawings lead there. The light leads there. Whatever's happening, whatever took him, it started down there." Izzy bit her lip. "Then we go in daylight. I'm not walking into that place after dark." Junie nodded. Daylight. Tomorrow. They started back down the hill, the last light fading fast behind them. The road was silent except for the crunch of their boots and the sigh of distant wind. Harrow Creek's buildings stood like hollow sentinels, their windows black, their doors sealed tight against the coming dark. As they neared Junie's house, Izzy slowed. "Do you really think we'll find him?" she asked quietly. Junie didn't answer right away. She looked at the glowing smear on her sleeve, a faint streak of blue she hadn't noticed before. It shimmered when she moved, then dimmed again. "I don't know," she said finally, "but I think he's closer than we think." That night, Junie couldn't sleep again. She sat by the window, staring out at the darkened streets. The world felt too still, too quiet. Then she saw it, a faint flicker near the storm drain. Not like firelight, not like any reflection she'd seen. A small, pulsing blue glow, just bright enough to stain the mist. She leaned closer to the glass. For a moment she could swear she saw a shape move past it, small, human-sized. Her chest tightened. "Mixon?" she whispered, her breath fogging the glass. The light blinked twice, then vanished. Chapter 7. The morning came gray and thin, filtered through a veil of mist that swallowed the horizon. The world felt stripped of sound again, like someone had pressed a thumb to the pulse of Harrow Creek. No birds, no wind, just the faint, continuous hum beneath everything, that same trembling tone Junie had begun to hear, even in her sleep. She sat at the kitchen table, her hands cupped around a mug of water she hadn't drunk from. Her mother hadn't come out of her room since the vigil. The house felt hollow without her, like a place half remembered, half abandoned. Izzy arrived before dawn, her boots soaked and her face pale. She didn't have to say why she was there. Junie already knew. The road was calling. The hum was louder now, and in the distance, the mist over the hills glowed fallingly blue, where the mine entrances lay hidden beneath the scrub and rubble. Neither girl spoke for a long time. Junie slipped Mixon's last drawing into her pack, the one with the looping, vein-like paths that led from the town's heart to something deeper underground. She folded it along the creases, careful not to smudge the lines, and tucked it between the pages of an old field guide to local geology, a relic from before the event. When they stepped outside, the town was just beginning to stir. A few shutters creaked open, cautious eyes glancing toward the pale sky. Junie could almost feel their judgment, the silent disapproval of neighbors who'd decided long ago that hope was a dangerous thing to keep. Izzy pulled her hood tighter. "We don't have to go all the way in," she murmured. Junie's voice came out raw. "We do." They started walking down what was once County Road 9, now just a fractured line of asphalt running between fields of brittle grass and dead trees. Every few yards, the hum grew louder, vibrating up through the soles of their shoes. It was no longer just a sound. It was a feeling, a pressure in the air that made their teeth ache and their bones feel hollow. A mile out, they found the checkpoint. It was little more than a rusted barricade of sheet metal and barbed wire with an old wooden sign leaning crookedly in the dirt. Authorized personnel, only mine district closed since nightfall event. The letters had been scorched black, half melted by something far hotter than fire. Izzy crouched to inspect the ground. "Look at this." The dirt beneath the barricade was burned in uneven circles, patterns like melted glass, fused with small crystalline shards that caught what little light there was and reflected it in faint blue tones. The afterlight again. Junie knelt beside her, brushing her fingers over the surface. It was cold to the touch, but she could feel that same vibration humming through it. Stronger now. "It's been here," she said softly. "You mean they've been here?" Junie didn't answer. She lifted one of the rusted panels just enough for them to slip through. Beyond it, the road narrowed, winding upward toward the old hills that loomed like sleeping beasts over Harrow Creek. As they climbed, the town receded behind them, a smear of pale roofs half hidden in the fog. Ahead, the land grew rougher. Grass gave way to clay and stone, scattered with abandoned mining carts and cracked rails swallowed by vines. The skeletal remains of conveyor belts stretched toward the horizon, twisted metal bones pointing accusingly at the sky. Izzy stopped to catch her breath, her voice barely a whisper. "Feels like the world ended up here first." Junie turned in a slow circle. Maybe it did. A gust of wind drifted through the valley, carrying the faint smell of iron and something else, a scent that made Junie's stomach turn. Sweet, rotted, electric. The smell of ozone after lightning. They reached the first mine outbuilding just past noon. The structure was nothing more than a shell. Its walls bowed inward, its roof collapsed. Inside, the air was colder than it should have been. A single miner's helmet hung from a nail near the doorway. The lamp shattered. Junie ran her hand over the corrugated metal, feeling how brittle it was like old bark. "You think anyone ever came back up here after nightfall?" Izzy shook her head. "Not alive." Junie gave a humorless laugh. "Then maybe we'll be the first." They continued deeper into the mining district, where the road turned from asphalt to dirt. Every step stirred a thin cloud of red dust that clung to their shoes and glowed faintly when the wind shifted, specks of afterlight caught in the soil. The hum was louder here, constant and unbroken. By the time they reached the 2nd-mile marker, the sun was already starting its downward crawl. "Junie," Izzy said, her voice tight, "we said we'd be back before dark." Junie didn't slow down. "Then we move faster." They came to a fork where the road split, one path leading toward the collapsed north shaft, the other twisting toward the deeper tunnels that had been sealed off after the event. The signs were rusted beyond legibility, but Junie recognized the shape from Mixon's drawings, the circular loops, the branching lines like arteries. "He drew this," she whispered. "This exact path." Izzy hesitated. "You think he's down there?" Junie turned to her, eyes fierce. "I don't think. I know." The wind picked up, stirring dust across the cracked pavement. For a moment the air shimmered faintly blue, like a pulse rippling through the landscape. Then the hum shifted deeper now, almost melodic. It wasn't random, it was patterned, rising and falling in intervals that felt too deliberate to be natural. Izzy swallowed hard. It's singing." Junie nodded slowly, her skin crawling. "Calling?" The second path narrowed until it was little more than a trail between jagged rock formations. The hills rose around them, swallowing what remained of the daylight. As the shadows lengthened, the faint blue afterlight began to reveal itself along the walls, veins glowing through cracks in the stone, tracing a map none of them could read. Junie reached out to steady herself, her palm brushing one of the glowing lines. Instantly, the hum sharpened in pitch, a flicker of energy pulsing through the rock. The light brightened for just a heartbeat, then dimmed again. "Careful," Izzy hissed, grabbing her wrist. Junie stepped back, trembling. "It reacted." Izzy scanned the darkness ahead. "What if it knows we're here?" Junie exhaled shakily. "Then maybe it'll lead us to him." They followed the trail another half-mile before the path ended abruptly at a cliffside. Below, the remnants of the primary mine complex sprawled across the valley, a skeletal network of rail lines, silos, and cracked elevators. Rusted cranes loomed like drowned giants over pools of stagnant water. The largest structure, the main shaft entrance, was sealed with heavy iron doors chained shut. But the blue light seeped from the cracks around it like veins of luminescent mist. "Mixon's light," Junie whispered. Izzy's voice was barely audible. "Junie, I don't think we should go closer." But Junie was already moving. She descended the slope carefully, her boots sliding in the red dust. The air grew colder the closer she got, until she could see her breath. She approached the massive iron doors and pressed her ear against them. The hum was deafening here, so deep it vibrated her chest cavity, almost like a heartbeat echoing through the metal. It wasn't constant anymore. It pulsed. She whispered his name, "Mixon," and immediately the hum shifted. The air trembled. A faint tremor rippled through the ground. Izzy stumbled down the slope after her. "What the hell was that?" Junie stepped back, eyes wide. "It responded." "Responded how?" "Like it heard me." Izzy's face was pale. "Junie, please. We need to leave. The sun's almost gone." Junie turned toward the horizon. The last of the light was bleeding out of the sky, staining the clouds in sickly oranges and grays. Already the shadows were deepening between the hills. In another 15 minutes, the creatures would wake. She should have listened, but the hum, that strange, resonant tone, was stronger than fear now. It felt alive, intelligent. Junie reached for one of the chains sealing the door. It was thick with rust, brittle from years of weathering. She tugged. It snapped with a sound like breaking bone. Izzy's whisper cut through the air like a plea. Don't. But Junie pulled again. The second chain fell away. A hiss of air escaped from the gap between the doors, cold, dry, metallic. Then a sound rose from the depths beyond them. It wasn't the hum anymore. It was something like breathing. Slow, rhythmic, vast. Izzy stumbled backward, grabbing Junie's arm. We have to go. Now. Junie stared into the crack, eyes straining to see what lay beyond. All she could make out was darkness, thick, viscous, moving. Then she saw it, a flicker of blue deep inside, faint but distinct, a shimmer of light, pulsing once. Her heart stopped. He's in there. Izzy's grip tightened. That's not him, Junie. The light pulsed again. This time, there was a sound, a soft, trembling voice, barely audible over the hum. Junie. Her blood turned to ice. Izzy dragged her back, almost shouting now despite the danger. That's not your brother! We have to go! But Junie couldn't move. Her eyes were fixed on that light, on the impossible shape emerging behind it. Something was moving in the dark. Slow, deliberate, massive. The air grew thick, vibrating with low frequency as if the earth itself were resonating with whatever lived below. The first drop of twilight touched the hilltops. The glow inside the mine sharpened, then began to spread thin tendrils of blue seeping through the cracks in the metal, crawling outward like veins searching for air. Junie finally stumbled back, her breath coming in short gasps. We're too late! Izzy pulled her away from the door just as the hum shifted again, no longer rhythmic, no longer calm. Now it roared. The ground beneath them quivered, small stones tumbling from the hillside. Somewhere in the valley, a distant shriek rose into the dusk, not human, not animal, a sound like steel being dragged across bone. They ran. The hum chased them up the slope, pulsing through the earth like a heartbeat out of sync. The air felt heavy, charged, as if the entire valley was waking from sleep. By the time they reached the road again, the sun was gone. The mist rolled in fast, thick and alive. Behind them, faint blue light leaked up from the valley like a rising tide. Junie stopped only once to look back. The iron doors of the mine were glowing now, the seams burning with pale light. The chains they'd broken lay twisted in the dirt. Something moved behind those doors, something that knew her name. Izzy grabbed her shoulder. Junie, move! They sprinted until Harrow Creek came back into view, a dark smear against the horizon. The town was already asleep, its silence absolute. Junie slowed, clutching her side, gasping. She turned one last time toward the hills. The blue light was gone now, swallowed by night. But the hum remained, faint, steady, patient. And beneath it, just barely audible, a voice like her brother's laughter echoed once through the distance. Chapter 8. The morning after their encounter at the mine, Junie and Izzy approached the abandoned complex in daylight. The sun hung low in the sky, pale and hesitant, like it too feared the hills. Shadows stretched long across the valley, sharp and angular, splitting the cracked roads and twisted metal into jagged fragments of black. Junie's hands were raw from the climb the night before, but she didn't care. Her eyes were fixed on the pale blue residue that shimmered faintly along the mine entrance. Even in daylight, it pulsed subtly, a heartbeat embedded in the stone. Are you sure about this? Izzy asked, her voice tight as she adjusted the straps of her pack. If we went back last night, we would have been dead, Junie finished for her. I know, but it's the only way. He's still in there, Iz. I can feel it. The afterlight, it's pointing us right to him. They approached the main shaft cautiously. The iron doors were gone, the chains and rusted panels that had sealed the entrance the night before lay twisted in the dirt, scarred with fresh dents and scratches. The blue veins of afterlight ran through the cracks in the walls and onto the metal, pulsating faintly, almost as if aware of their presence. Junie touched the glow again. The vibration thrummed through her fingertips, a steady, insistent pulse. She could almost hear a voice beneath it, soft, childlike, calling her name. Distorted by distance and time, she shivered, trying to keep her fear under control. They stepped inside the mine. The air was colder than expected, carrying a metallic tang that made Junie's throat tighten. The walls here were lined with broken machinery, conveyor belts twisted into grotesque shapes, and rail tracks warped from years of neglect. Pools of stagnant water reflected the flickering light of the afterlight veins, making the shadows move as though alive. Izzy held a broken lantern, its weak glow illuminating the nearest stretch of tunnel. "This place feels wrong," she muttered, "like it remembers what happened here." Junie didn't respond. Her eyes scanned the ground, following the faint scratches, smudges, and strange markings etched into the stone. Some looked like claw marks, jagged and deep. Others were almost decorative, swirling patterns that seemed to follow the flow of the afterlight. They moved deeper into the tunnel, careful to make no unnecessary sound. Even a whisper here might be enough to draw attention from the creatures still lurking beneath the night. Every step echoed faintly, and Junie had to fight the urge to pause, listening for the hum she remembered from the hill. After several minutes, they reached a junction. One path led to a collapsed shaft, jagged rocks sealing off further exploration. The other led downward, deeper into the bowels of the mine. The afterlight veins grew more pronounced here, climbing the walls and pooling in cracks, illuminating the tunnel with a faint blue glow. Izzy crouched to examine a small pile of debris. Amid the rocks and broken tools, she found a small leather-bound notebook, the cover caked in dust and grime. She held it up for Junie to see. "It's a logbook," she said, flipping it open carefully. The pages were yellowed, brittle, filled with neat handwriting from decades ago. "Listen to this." Her voice carried in the hollow chamber. Junie leaned in as Izzy read aloud. "We've pierced the resonance layer. Initial readings show fluctuations beyond comprehension. The light reacts to sound, vibrations, and our instruments. The miners are growing uneasy. Some claim to hear voices, whispers in the tunnels. Others see fleeting glimmers in the walls, like veins of some living substance. We must proceed cautiously." Junie felt a chill crawl along her spine. "Resonance layer?" she whispered. This is what they were mining?" Izzy nodded, turning the page. "It gets worse. They write about experiments drilling into veins that shouldn't exist, cutting into layers of the earth that were unnatural. They mention the nightfall event in the last entry. The light calls to them. They are blind, but they know the hum. We have awoken something." Junie's stomach twisted. The afterlight, the hum, the creatures it all connected. The mining operations had disturbed something dormant, something alive, something that had called forth the horrors that now stalked Harrow Creek at night. "Junie," Izzy whispered, tugging her arm. "Look at this." She pointed toward a section of the wall where the afterlight pooled thickly, almost like sap. A mass of organic growth covered the stone, pulsing faintly, veined with the same luminescence. It undulated in a rhythm that matched the hum beneath their feet. The texture looked wet, like membranes stretched over sinew, and Junie's stomach clenched. "They're alive," she breathed. "Not the creatures," Izzy said quietly. That thing in the wall. It's conscious." Junie stepped closer, careful not to touch it, but as her gaze met the pulsating surface, she felt it in her mind. Not a voice, not words, but impressions. Follow the hum. Follow the veins. Find the child. Her breath caught. It was Mixon. She could feel him, somewhere in this living labyrinth. Suddenly, a scraping noise echoed through the tunnel. Junie spun toward it, heart hammering. Shadows shifted against the walls, darker than the dim afterlight could illuminate. A movement slow, deliberate. Something vast passed behind the pulsing glow. The air became thick, as if the mine itself had inhaled. "Junie," Izzy hissed, gripping her shoulder. "We need to go now." But Junie couldn't move. The hum had changed faster, sharper, insistent. It wasn't just a vibration anymore. It was a language, a call, and she knew instinctively it was reaching out to Mixon. Then, a faint voice, high, childish, trembling, echoed through the tunnels. "Junie!" Her knees buckled. She pressed forward, crawling over debris and broken rails, following the voice, following the veins of afterlight. Each step drew her deeper into the mine's hollow places, into the organic heart of the underground. Izzy followed reluctantly, every instinct screaming at her to retreat. "Junie, this is insane!" Junie ignored her. She had felt the connection. She had seen the veins, the light, the hum. Mixon was here, somewhere beyond the walls, somewhere within the living mine. And she wasn't leaving without him. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, the ceiling lost in shadows. Massive machinery lay scattered like dead giants. Water dripped from broken pipes, echoing softly across the hollow. The walls throbbed faintly with the afterlight, casting everything in an otherworldly glow. And there, at the far end of the chamber, she saw movement. A small shape, too small to be anything other than human, darting between shadows. Junie ran, Izzy right behind her. "Mixon?" she shouted. The shape froze. Then, a glimmer of light, blue and pulsating, radiated outward. It was faint, but unmistakable. The afterlight wrapped around him, almost protective, guiding, pulsing with life. Junie's heart leapt. "I've got you! I've got you!" But as she approached, the shadows around him shifted. The pulsing light twisted and writhed, and a low vibration filled the chamber, far deeper and more resonant than anything she had felt before. The air thickened. The mine itself seemed aware. Izzy grabbed Junie, holding her back. "Wait, something's—" Before she could finish, a mass of darkness surged forward from the wall, moving with impossible speed. It wasn't the creatures outside. This was the heart of the mine itself, alive, sensing, watching. Junie's chest hammered. She had to reach him. She had to get Mixon out. The afterlight pulsed stronger, almost screaming now, and in that resonance, Junie felt it clearly. The veins of light weren't just guidance. They were a map, a warning, a shield. She whispered his name again. "Mixon, follow me." And he did. Chapter 9. By the time Junie and Izzy reached the edge of Harrow Creek again, dawn had already broken. The sunlight felt harsh after the suffocating dark of the mines, so bright that it almost seemed to burn their skin. For a moment, Junie thought she saw a faint shimmer still clinging to her hands, as if the afterlight had branded her. They walked down the cracked asphalt road in silence. The town unfolded before them like a photograph, left too long in the sun, washed out, faded, and eerily still. The houses stood with their curtains drawn, their doors locked tight, and the smell of burnt oil lingered faintly in the air from the lanterns everyone used after sunset. No one looked up as they passed. Harrow Creek existed in two worlds, now the shallow one above, full of sunlight and denial, and the deep one below, where something alive pulsed through the stone. The townsfolk clung to the first world like drowning people clutching debris, pretending the other didn't exist. Izzy broke the silence first. "We should tell someone," she said, "about the tunnels, about what's growing down there." Junie's voice came out hoarse. "Who's going to believe us? They've spent years pretending nothing's wrong. You saw their faces after the last search. They already buried Mixon in their minds." They passed the square where the old clock tower leaned slightly to one side. A handful of people stood outside the general store, trading half-hearted gossip. The moment Junie and Izzy appeared, the conversation died. Eyes slid toward them, not curious, just cautious. Mrs. Harland, the widow who'd lost her son the year after the Nightfall event, offered a tight smile. "Morning, girls," she said. Her tone was brittle. "Out early?" Junie forced herself to nod. "Just walking." "Good. Stay close to home. You know how quick the light changes." And that was it. No mention of Mixon, no concern about where they'd been. Just the same ritual of pretending, like everyone had agreed long ago that speaking of the dark gave it strength. They moved on. At home, Junie's mother sat by the window, staring at nothing. The curtains were drawn half shut, letting only a thin ribbon of light cut across her face. The house smelled faintly of candle wax and stale bread. "Junie," she said softly as they entered. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. "You were out all night." "I was looking for him," Junie said. Her mother flinched at the word him. "You can't keep doing this. The marshal said—" "I don't care what he said," Junie snapped, her voice breaking. "Mixon's not gone. I heard him. Down there." Her mother's expression hardened, not out of anger, but out of fear. "Don't say that where people can hear. Please." "Why not?" Junie demanded. "Why does everyone act like this, like it's fine, like we didn't wake something up under our feet?" Her mother's silence said everything. When Junie finally stormed out, Izzy followed. They walked toward the old section of town, where boarded-up houses leaned into each other like broken teeth. Somewhere beyond them stood the old miner's tavern, now a creaking ruin that smelled of rust and mildew. That's where Junie had heard Elias still lived. Elias Harrow, the last surviving foreman of the mining operation that had first struck the resonance layer, the man who had seen what the town chose to forget. They found him sitting on the porch, sharpening a rusted hunting knife with slow, deliberate motions. His eyes were pale blue and filmed with age. But when he looked at Junie, something sharp flickered their recognition, maybe even guilt. "You're Mixon's sister," he said quietly. "You've got his stubborn eyes." Junie stepped closer. "You knew my brother?" He shook his head. "Didn't have to. I know the look of someone the dark's got its teeth in." Izzy shifted uncomfortably, but Junie pressed on. "I need to know what's under this town. The mines, the light, all of it. Nobody will tell the truth." Elias leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking beneath him. "Truth's heavy, girl. Most folks can't carry it. That's why they pretend." Junie folded her arms. "Try me." The old man sighed, wiped his knife on his pant leg, and stared out toward the hills. "You ever wonder why we called it the Afterlight before it started glowing? Back then, it was just a name we made up in the mine. We hit a layer of rock that hummed when you drilled it. Not metal, not gas, something else. The light came later after we broke through." "What was it?" "Hell if I know, but the dark was never empty, girl. We just woke it up." The wind whistled through the broken siding of the tavern. Izzy's arms tightened around herself. "Some of the men didn't come back," Elias went on. "Not all of them died either. You ever hear breathing in the tunnels when there's no one there? Or voices where the air's too still for sound? That's them. Or what's left of them. Sometimes I think they're still digging." Junie's throat went dry. "You mean the miners?" He nodded slowly. "Ain't all the things down there from the stars, girl. Some of them used to be us." Izzy let out a shaky laugh that didn't sound like laughter at all. "That's not possible." Elias turned his pale eyes on her. "You think what's happened to this town's possible? You think it's normal that the dark's alive? That the light screams when you make a sound? We cracked something open. Something older than light. Older than time." Junie felt the words sink into her like stones. She thought about the organic mass she'd seen in the tunnel, the way it pulsed, the way it listened, the hum that wasn't just sound, but thought. Elias leaned forward. "Whatever you're doing, stop. Don't go back down there. That boy you're looking for, if he's still breathing, he's not the same anymore. You hear me?" Junie's hands balled into fists. "If there's even a chance he's alive, I have to try." The old miner's jaw tightened. "Then God help you." They left Elias sitting on the porch, staring toward the mine road as though expecting the earth itself to rise up and swallow him. The walk back to town was quiet, except for the distant caw of crows and the whisper of wind through dead wheat fields. Harrow Creek seemed smaller now, less a town and more a husk wrapped around something pulsing beneath it. As they passed the clock tower again, Junie noticed something strange, faint threads of afterlight seeping through the cracks in the pavement, thin and delicate like veins beneath skin. They hadn't been there yesterday. She crouched to touch one. It pulsed faintly at her fingertips. Izzy grabbed her wrist. "Don't." "It's spreading," Junie whispered. "The mines aren't containing it anymore." "Then we should leave, before it spreads further." Junie shook her head. "No. We have to know what's under there, what it wants. Elias said some of the miners never came back. What if Mixon's trapped the same way?" Izzy stared at her for a long moment, then looked away. "You're not going to stop, are you?" Junie met her eyes. "Would you?" Izzy didn't answer. That night, Harrow Creek looked almost peaceful under the dying sun. Children played quietly in fenced yards. Lanterns flickered behind shuttered windows. The smell of wood smoke filled the air. To an outsider, it would seem like any other small town preparing for dusk. But Junie saw it differently now. Every quiet laugh, every forced smile was a layer of armor, a desperate performance meant to keep the truth buried. The town pretended because acknowledging the dark would break them. And as she watched the last rays of daylight sink below the ridge, she made a silent promise to herself and to Mixon. She wouldn't pretend. Not anymore. Whatever lived beneath Harrow Creek, whatever had been woken by the miners and the afterlight, she would face it, even if it meant descending into the dark again. Chapter 10. The air that night felt different, too still, too deliberate. Harrow Creek at dusk had always been quiet, but this silence was something older, something watchful. The wind didn't move through the broken fences or empty fields. It simply hung there, heavy and stagnant, as if the whole world were holding its breath. Junie stood by her window, watching the last of the daylight leak away behind the jagged tree line. The sun was bleeding out, throwing thin orange veins across the horizon before sinking into the black. She could see her reflection faintly in the glass, drawn face, cracked lips, eyes rimmed with sleepless red. Behind her, the house was dim except for the faint glow of a covered lantern. It had been 6 days since Mixon disappeared. 6 days of searching every daylight hour, of knocking on doors that stayed shut, of whispering questions that earned only lowered eyes. 6 days of walking past empty porches where people once sat in the evenings, watching the children play until the sirens called them home before nightfall. But there was no more playing, no more laughter in the dust. Izzy sat cross-legged on the floor behind her, carefully layering strips of torn blanket over the metal casing of a flashlight. "If we wrap it enough, it'll muffle the sound when we switch it on," she murmured, her voice soft, the way people spoke in this town after dark, "and we can cut the beam with tape, make it narrow, like a thread." Junie turned from the window. The sight of Izzy's determined hands, the way they moved, trembling slightly, tightened something in her chest. "You don't have to come," Junie said, for what must have been the 10th time that day. Izzy didn't look up. "You'd go alone." "Yes." "Then I'm going." The room felt quiet again except for the faint scrape of fabric against metal. Junie walked over to the small table where their supplies were laid out in neat rows. 2 flashlights, both muted and taped, a small radio switched off and wrapped in cloth, a single canteen of water, and a length of rope salvaged from behind the mill. There was no food. They weren't going far enough for that. Not yet. The real problem wasn't what they had to bring. It was what they couldn't. No noise, no light, no mistakes. Junie knelt and checked her shoes. Old leather boots softened by years of wear. Their soles nearly silent. She'd removed the laces and replaced them with cloth ties. Even the smallest snap of a string could echo too far. She pulled her hair back tight, then covered it with a dark scarf. Izzy was already dressed the same. Layers of fabric muted every part of her that could reflect or rustle. When the sun's last edge vanished, they waited. Not long. Just enough for the town to sink into the kind of blackness that erased edges and faces. Then they stepped outside. The air outside was damp and cold, heavy with the smell of moss and rust. Every house they passed looked like a gravestone, windows black, doors sealed, rooftops sagging under years of neglect. A pale moon tried to break through the clouds, but its light was sickly, fractured by the thick haze that always rolled in from the mines after nightfall. They moved slow, deliberate, matching their breaths to their steps. The main street was unrecognizable at night. What used to be the heart of Harrow Creek, the diner, the post office, the schoolyard, was now a corridor of stillness. Shadows bloomed in the corners of every building, and the sound of their own heartbeats seemed too loud. Every now and then, a distant sound would reach them, something creaking, something shifting, but they didn't dare stop to listen. Junie led the way, her taped flashlight flickering dimly against the ground. The beam was so narrow it barely reached beyond her shoes, and every step felt like walking through liquid black. Izzy's breath ghosted behind her. "I can't believe we're doing this," she whispered. "We won't find them during the day," Junie whispered back. "They hide underground until the sun's gone. If Mixon's down there, we have to see what happens when they come out." Izzy didn't answer, but Junie didn't need her to. The silence between them was filled with the weight of everything they hadn't said, the fear, the exhaustion, the guilt. As they crossed the empty intersection by the old hardware store, Junie paused. Her flashlight beam skimmed across a wall of the building, revealing faded graffiti scrawled in charcoal. "Don't wake them." The letters were smeared, as if someone had tried to wipe them away. Izzy noticed too. That Wasn't here before, she murmured. Junie's stomach twisted. Let's keep moving. They turned down Ash Mill Road, where the asphalt cracked open like a scar and weeds grew tall through the gaps. The road led toward the storm drain system that ran beneath the old quarry, a maze of tunnels and runoff channels that eventually connected to the abandoned mining shafts. It was said the creatures first emerged from those tunnels. No one went there anymore. Junie's beam swept across the overgrown ditch that paralleled the road. The metal grate leading to the storm drain was half buried in mud and rust, its bars twisted like something had pried them apart. She crouched beside it, brushing away leaves, and felt a faint current of cold air rising from below. Izzy knelt beside her, shining her own faint beam into the gap. The light fell on water, still, black, reflecting nothing. That's it, Junie said softly. That's where they start. Izzy swallowed. Do you hear that? They froze. At first, it was nothing, just the faint hiss of wind through the trees. But then came the sound again, a low, rhythmic thudding. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far either. It echoed from somewhere deep within the tunnels, a pulse that made the metal bars vibrate faintly under Junie's hand. Not footsteps. Not exactly. Something heavier. She held her breath until it stopped. Then, slowly, they pulled the grate aside and slipped inside. The air below was colder, wet, heavy with the smell of earth and decay. Their muffled flashlights barely pierced the dark, but it was enough to reveal a narrow walkway beside a shallow flow of water. The walls were slick with moss, and the ceiling curved low, forcing them to hunch. Every sound was amplified here, the drip of water, the whisper of fabric against stone. It all bounced back, multiplied until it became impossible to tell where it came from. Junie pressed her hand against the wall. The stone felt strangely warm in places, like something alive was moving behind it. They moved deeper, following the faint current. The tunnels branched again and again. Some passages collapsed, others opening into chambers that smelled of rot and rust. They passed what looked like the remnants of old maintenance equipment, a rusted wheelbarrow, a shattered helmet, the skeletal remains of wooden supports. Izzy's light flickered briefly across something on the wall, marks scratched deep into the stone. She leaned closer. They look like claw marks. Junie nodded. They were digging. For what? Junie didn't answer. The air grew thicker, almost gelatinous, as if the dark itself were pressing down on them. The deeper they went, the more the walls began to shimmer faintly, a residue like frost that caught the edge of their light and glowed a dull silver before fading again. When they finally reached a wide chamber, Junie stopped. The ceiling had collapsed partially, forming an opening above that led somewhere deeper. From that hole came a sound so faint it almost wasn't there, a sighing breath, slow and patient. Izzy looked up, her eyes wide. Are those? Junie silenced her with a gesture. They waited, unmoving as the air around them vibrated. Then came the sound again, but closer this time, a scrape of something long and dry against the tunnel wall. The flashlight in Junie's hand flickered. The vibration pulsed through her bones, low, resonant, the way thunder feels before you hear it. Izzy's hand found Junie's, and then from somewhere just beyond the edge of their dim light came a movement, slow, deliberate, accompanied by a sound like wet fabric dragging across stone. Something was down here, something awake. Junie squeezed Izzy's hand once, then turned off her light. The darkness rushed in like a living thing. They crouched low, hearts pounding, every breath measured, silent. And as the black swallowed them whole, a single thought cut through Junie's mind. This is only the beginning. Chapter 11. The tunnels had no end. They just descended. Every corridor felt like a mouth swallowing light, swallowing air. The deeper Junie and Izzy went, the more they became aware of the sound of themselves. Breath, heartbeat, the soft scrape of cloth. It was unbearable, like being trapped in a room where silence had weight and sound had shape. They had learned to move without speaking, to communicate only through touch, a hand on a shoulder, a squeeze to stop, a pull to move forward. The flashlights were reduced to slivers, their glow dim enough to show only the next step. Anything brighter would be a death sentence. The ground underfoot changed from concrete to stone, then to damp earth, riddled with thin veins of something luminous faint, ghostly blue like veins under translucent skin. It pulsed very slightly, though neither of them wanted to believe it was alive. The air smelled metallic, laced with sulfur and rot, like something old had been disturbed after centuries of sleep. Izzy's hand brushed one of the glowing streaks on the wall, and she flinched. "It's warm," she mouthed. Junie nodded, her face pale in the dim light. The warmth had a rhythm, almost like breathing. They came to a split in the tunnel left sloping downward, right veering toward a half-collapsed passage where water trickled faintly. Junie crouched, running her fingers along the muddy ground. There were print smears, really like something had dragged itself through here, long and narrow, clawed, uneven. The air in the left passage stirred, faintly rippling the surface of the puddles. A current, a pull. Something was moving somewhere far below. Junie pointed left. Izzy hesitated, then nodded. They went. At some point, it became hard to tell how much time had passed. Minutes bled into hours, the world reduced to a tunnel of shadow and pulse. Junie's flashlight began to dim. The battery was failing. She switched to Izzy's, and they wrapped the old one in cloth to muffle the faint whine of its dying filament. That was when they heard it. A noise, faint, rhythmic, just behind them. Not footsteps, breathing. Low, deep, wet. Junie froze. Izzy felt her stop and turned. Her eyes widened, the kind of widening that doesn't come from surprise, but from recognition. There was something in the dark, not close enough to see, but close enough to feel. The air was vibrating again, the same low hum they'd felt before, as if sound were being swallowed and then exhaled again, distorted. They knelt in the mud, both trembling, the water around their knees rippling with each heartbeat. Junie raised her hand, signaling to stay still. The breathing drew nearer, slow, deliberate, sniffing the air. Then, from the darkness behind them, a faint shimmer began to form. At first, it was only a suggestion, a ripple, like heat above asphalt. But then it solidified, a shape too tall for the tunnel, folding itself unnaturally, its limbs long enough to drag. Its skin wasn't skin at all, but a shifting membrane that caught and warped light, glinting faintly like oil. Where a face might have been, there was nothing, only a smooth expanse that seemed to listen. Junie's mind struggled to make sense of it. She remembered what Elias had said in the diner, the dark was never empty. Now she understood. The dark had ears. Izzy's breath hitched. Just once, but it was enough. The thing turned its head. Not fast, not sudden, just a slow, deliberate rotation, as if the air itself had whispered its name. Junie's pulse roared in her ears. She mouthed, "Don't move." But Izzy's knee slipped against the slick wall, her boots scraping metal. The sound so small, so human, tore through the silence like lightning. The creature's entire body reacted at once. Its surface flared, erupting in pale, shifting color, the membrane shimmering in violent waves. And then came the sound, not a scream, not exactly, but a vibration so deep it bypassed hearing altogether. It was a feeling. Their teeth rattled, their eyes burned. The flashlight flickered as if the air itself were being shredded. Izzy clutched her ears, blood streaking from one. Junie couldn't even cry out. The sound pressed against her throat and pinned her in place. Then, suddenly, it stopped. Silence slammed back into the world like a closing door. Junie dared not breathe. The creature stood motionless for a moment, its head tilting, listening. Then it began to move slow, mechanical, each limb testing the space ahead. Its claws scraped the stone, leaving long gouges in the walls. Junie pulled Izzy toward a rusted tunnel shaft that jutted from the floor, a maintenance conduit barely big enough for one of them to crawl inside. Together they slid in, their backs against the cold metal, the smell of rust and wet earth thick enough to taste. The creature approached the mouth of the shaft. Its steps were silent now. It leaned down, its head tilting, sniffing. Junie could see the faint shimmer of its membrane, thin as paper, pulsing faintly like something filled with breath. It was close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating off it, the subtle displacement of air as it moved. Izzy pressed a hand over her own mouth to stifle the sound of her breathing. Junie did the same. Neither dared blink. The creature lowered itself further. Its claw scraped the metal lip of the shaft. Slow, deliberate testing, tasting. The sound made Junie's entire body seize. Then, from somewhere deeper in the tunnels, another vibration came distant, calling. The creature froze, its head turning slightly toward the sound. Its body pulsed once with faint light, then folded itself backward, retreating in impossibly fluid motion. Within seconds, it was gone, melting into the dark as if it had never been there. Junie waited. 1 minute, 2, 10. Only after the trembling in her hands began to subside did she exhale. Izzy was crying silently beside her, shoulders shaking, her face streaked with blood from her nose and ears. Junie reached for her hand, gripping it tight. "We're okay," she whispered, though her voice was barely audible. But they weren't okay. Something had changed in that moment, the way the air moved, the way the tunnels seemed to breathe back at them. The silence was no longer empty. It was aware, listening. They crawled out slowly, careful not to make a sound. The air smelled sharper now, tinged with ozone like the aftermath of lightning. The tunnel ahead glowed faintly the same pulsing veins of afterlight, but brighter now, responding to the disturbance. Junie wiped the blood from Izzy's face with her sleeve. Izzy's eyes were wide and unfocused, her hands trembling uncontrollably. Junie held her close for a long moment, until their breaths aligned again. Then they moved forward toward the light. Each step deeper into the tunnel revealed more of the glowing residue. It wasn't random anymore. It formed patterns, arcs, clusters, as though drawn by hand. They weren't natural formations. Izzy pointed weakly at the wall. "Junie," she whispered. On the stone, half covered in moss and glowing faintly blue, was something unmistakably human. A handprint. Small, delicate. Junie's heart slammed against her ribs. She reached out, her fingertips trembling as they hovered above it. The glow pulsed faintly under her hand, and for a moment she thought she felt warmth, the ghost of life still lingering. "It's him," she breathed. Izzy looked at her. "Junie, we have to go back. That thing—" Junie shook her head. "No, he's down here. I can feel it." Izzy hesitated, her fear warring with the desperate certainty in Junie's voice. Finally, she nodded once, sharply. They turned back toward the glowing tunnel, where the light grew stronger and the air grew warmer, pulsing in time with something far below. Behind them, in the darkness they had left behind, the faint sound of movement began again, more than one this time, a chorus of breathing, slow and synchronized. The listening ones were awake now. And they knew they were not alone. Chapter 12. The tunnels were no longer just tunnels. They were arteries carrying a slow pulse through the veins of Harrow Creek's underworld. The walls glistened, soft with dampness and the faint phosphorescent shimmer of afterlight. It wasn't constant. It breathed. The glow brightened and faded in rhythm, as though the stone itself inhaled and exhaled. Junie and Izzy walked like ghosts, their steps deliberate, every movement measured. Each exhale was caught halfway, stifled by fear. The silence wasn't true silence anymore. It was layered, textured. Beneath it, you could hear things. A drip, a faint throb. Sometimes a fluttering vibration like wings. Sometimes almost a whisper. Junie didn't mention it to Izzy, but she was hearing music. A lullaby. A sound she hadn't heard in years, the one their mother used to hum when she tucked Mixon in. The one Junie would tease her brother about, calling it a baby song. Now it threaded through the air like a scent. Faint, sweet, and impossibly wrong. They followed the glow. The deeper they went, the more afterlight they found. The residue had spread into fractal shapes along the walls. Spirals, lines, almost like drawings. Junie paused at one cluster, shining her light just long enough to make out crude shapes scratched into the surface. Stick figures, a sun, a house. Mixon drew these, she whispered, her voice breaking. Izzy shook her head. It could be anyone. No. Junie traced one of the stick figures with her finger. He always drew the sun like that, with 8 rays. He said it was lucky. The air grew warmer around them, and the smell changed. Not just earth and rust anymore, something organic, almost sweet, like sap mixed with blood. Izzy's breathing quickened. Junie, I don't like this. We shouldn't. Then they both froze. Because from somewhere ahead down the curving slope of the tunnel, where the afterlight thickened into a pale blue mist, came a voice. Soft, childlike, humming. It wasn't imagination. Junie's throat closed. That voice was Mixon's. She didn't wait for Izzy. She moved forward, light trembling in her hands. The tunnel widened into a cavern, a hollow place where ceiling and walls met in warped, organic shapes, like melted wax. The glow here was stronger, dripping from the rock like liquid. Pools of it gathered on the floor, faintly rippling with their footsteps. And the voice, it was louder, still humming, off-key now like the tune was broken halfway through. Junie's tears came without permission. Mixon, she whispered. It's me, it's Junie. The humming stopped. Then, after a long silence, Junie? She gasped. It wasn't just the sound, it was the intonation, that small upward tilt at the end, that lilt of hope and confusion her brother always had when he was trying to sound brave. Izzy grabbed her wrist. Wait, we don't know what that is. But Junie shook free, her eyes searching the dark beyond the blue haze. Mixon, I'm here, where are you? She stepped into the center of the cavern. The floor felt softer underfoot, like standing on thick moss. The light beneath it pulsed faintly with each of her steps. Mixon, she said again. There was no answer, only the sound of something shifting deeper in the cavern. Izzy moved beside her, raising her covered flashlight, trying to pierce the fog. The beam reflected off something glistening on the far wall, a web-like film stretched across an opening. Behind it, the tunnel continued, narrower, curling downward like a throat. Junie's stomach twisted. She stepped closer, running her fingers over the wall. The texture was sticky organic. The glow from within seemed to come through it, like light behind skin. Izzy hissed, "Don't touch it," but Junie barely heard her. Because under her hand, the wall was warm, and when she pressed, something pulsed beneath it, a slow heartbeat. Then, faintly, from beyond that membrane, she heard it again. Junie. The voice was softer now, farther away, but it was him. She pressed harder, tears streaming down her face. Mixon, it's me. The glow beneath her hand brightened suddenly, blindingly so, and the membrane twitched, flexing like a living muscle. Junie stumbled back, gasping. Izzy grabbed her by the arm, pulling her away. It's alive, Junie! We need to go! But Junie wasn't listening. Her eyes were fixed on something just above the membrane, a faint impression on the stone wall. She raised her light, hands shaking. There, clear as day, was a handprint, small, child-sized, and glowing faintly with the same pale blue hue. Junie touched it. The glow brightened under her fingertips, and for a split second she saw movement behind the wall, a silhouette, small and curled, like a child asleep. Her heart stopped. Mixon, she breathed. Then the walls shuddered. The entire cavern trembled, dust falling from above. The glowing pools on the ground rippled violently. From the tunnels behind them came a low, resonant hum, the same vibration they'd heard when the creatures stirred. Izzy yanked her back. Junie, they're coming! But Junie was still staring at the wall. Frozen. The silhouette behind the membrane twitched and moved. Mixon? The hum deepened. Something massive stirred beneath their feet, a low groan echoing through the stone. The afterlight veins flared to life across every surface. Blue, gold, violet, all throbbing in unison. Izzy screamed without sound, tugging Junie toward the tunnel entrance. Junie tore her eyes away from the handprint, stumbling after her. The ground seemed to breathe, rising and falling under their feet, as if the cavern itself were alive. Behind them, the membrane split open with a wet sound, tearing like fabric. A rush of hot air burst through, carrying a smell like rust and rot. Something stepped out. They didn't see it clearly, only its outline against the haze. Too many limbs, too tall. Its surface shimmered with afterlight, pulsing in sync with the glow in the walls. Junie froze. One last look at the glowing handprint still fading behind the torn membrane. Then she and Izzy ran. The tunnel ahead was collapsing in tremors of light and sound, the hum now so low it made their bones ache. They sprinted blind, ducking falling stone, trying not to scream, because even here, even now, the listening ones were hunting sound. They burst through a fissure in the rock into another corridor, gasping for breath. The hum faded behind them, replaced by a faint echo that might have been the sound of many feet. Junie leaned against the wall, clutching her chest, tears streaking her face. Izzy was shaking so hard she dropped the flashlight, which flickered, rolled, and died. In the darkness, they huddled together, the afterlight still pulsing faintly along the walls. Junie whispered, barely audible, "He's alive, Izzy. I saw him." Izzy didn't answer. Her face was pale, eyes unfocused, mouth trembling. "You saw it too, didn't you?" Junie pressed. "He's alive down here." Izzy finally looked at her. "Junie, whatever that was, it wasn't him." Junie opened her mouth to argue, but then she stopped, because behind them, through the miles of tunnel they just fled, came that same small, trembling voice. Junie. Soft. Perfect. So painfully familiar, it broke her in half. She closed her eyes. And this time, she didn't whisper back. Chapter 13. The descent began like a dream remembered through static. Junie couldn't tell if her legs were shaking from exhaustion or from the pulse that seemed to hum through the stone. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was something her body felt, deep in the marrow, the same frequency she'd heard in Mixon's lullaby from the dark. The tunnel had become a throat. Every step forward felt like being swallowed, the air damp and trembling with unseen breath. Izzy followed close, her flashlight clutched to her chest, its beam reduced to a thumb-wide slit beneath layers of torn cloth. They had learned by now, too much light, too much sound, and the dark would answer back. "Junie," Izzy whispered, her voice trembling, "we should have stopped back there. You saw that mark. What if it wasn't Mixon?" Junie didn't respond. The glowing handprint was seared into her vision, the faint curve of tiny fingers dusted in afterlight like bioluminescent dust. Her brother's hand, years younger, years gone. But the wall had remembered him. That was all the proof she needed. The tunnel curved downward, widening until the narrow passage became a kind of sloping cavern, veined with afterlight like rivers frozen mid-flow. The glow intensified as they descended, until they could see without the flashlight. The light wasn't pure. It flickered, faintly blue, like moonlight filtered through deep water. Shadows warped with every movement, slithering up the walls as if alive. At the base of the slope, they found the opening. A rough circle carved by human hands decades ago, rail supports half-rotted, rust bleeding down the stone. The remains of an elevator track ran along the wall, ending abruptly in the void. Junie leaned forward, breath fogging, and saw only darkness stretching downward. "It's huge," Izzy whispered. "Hold on to the cable," Junie said. "It's still solid." It wasn't, not really, but the fear of staying still was worse. The metal was slick with condensation, every rung icy. The drop below felt endless, and the darkness moved when she stared too long. Her boots scraped rock. The silence pressed against them like water pressure, a heaviness that made every breath laborious. Then a sound. Low, rhythmic, breathing, not theirs. They froze. The flashlight flickered. For one unbearable second, Junie thought she saw motion far below, a shimmer of light, like afterlight caught on skin. Then the glow ebbed and the sound was gone. They climbed faster. When they reached bottom, Junie realized they'd left the world behind. This was something beneath it. A vast cavern opened before them, too immense to have been dug by men. The floor undulated like frozen waves, ridged with mineral growths and glittering veins of the blue material that pulsed like a heartbeat. The ceiling soared beyond their lights, lost in black. The air tasted metallic, faintly sweet. She felt it hum against her teeth. "What is this?" Izzy breathed. "It's like a heart." Junie took a step forward. It's alive. They walked, their footsteps muffled by dust and a thin layer of strange, soft moss that glowed faintly beneath them. The cavern narrowed into a natural corridor lined with stalactites, but unlike any they'd seen before, these dripped liquid light, droplets of afterlight falling like dew. Each drop hissed faintly when it struck the ground, releasing a ghostly glow. As they passed, Izzy reached out and caught a droplet on her finger. It pulsed once, then dimmed, leaving behind a faint shimmer in her skin. She rubbed it, but the glow didn't fade. "Don't touch it again," Junie said. "Why? It's just don't." They moved deeper, until the corridor opened into something impossible. A city. Underground. Buildings hewn from the rock, their edges softened by centuries. Roofs collapsed, windows shattered, all of it webbed with the same blue veins. It was as if an entire mining settlement had been dragged beneath the earth and fossilized in light. Signs hung in languages half erased by time, rusted tools lay beside skeletons of carts, lanterns filled with the blue liquid, and everywhere, silence. Junie knelt beside a rusted plaque. The lettering was almost gone, but she could make out part of it. ASHCROFTEXPANSIONPROJECT 1934. She looked at Izzy. They built over it. They didn't find a mine. They found this. Izzy's voice was barely a whisper. "You think the town knew?" "They knew enough to stop digging." They walked through the ruins, each echo stretching too long, repeating itself in ways sound shouldn't. Once, Junie thought she heard another set of footsteps behind them, but when she turned, only the cavern breathed. Still, the feeling of being watched grew thicker, pressing against the base of her skull. They came to a clearing. The ground sloped into a basin filled with a faint blue mist. The air shimmered with particles of afterlight like fireflies. And at the center stood a column of crystal, smooth and black, as tall as a church steeple. Around it, suspended from the ceiling by thin tendrils of translucent tissue, hung dozens of creatures. The listening ones. They hung upside down like monstrous bats, bodies long and impossibly thin, skin stretched tight over bone. Their heads were smooth, eyeless, their mouths small and lipless, breathing soundlessly. The shimmer of afterlight ran beneath their skin like rivers of light. Junie's chest constricted. Her throat burned with the need to scream, to do something, but she didn't move, didn't breathe. One of them twitched. Its head turned not toward her, but toward the column at the center of the room. Something glowed within the column. Something small, human-shaped. Junie took a step forward before she realized it. Izzy grabbed her sleeve, but she shook free. The form inside was curled like a sleeping child. Its hair floated around its head in the viscous glow. She pressed closer, her breath fogging the crystal. And then she saw it. Tiny fingers curled against the glass, and the faintest outline of a face she would have known anywhere. "Mixon," she whispered. Izzy's hand trembled on her shoulder. "It can't be. He's here." Junie pressed her palm to the glass. The light pulsed in response, brighter, faster, until the cavern began to glow. The creatures stirred overhead, their bodies twitching in rhythm with the pulse. Izzy grabbed her, trying to pull her back, but the column flared with a blinding light. And then Junie heard it. Not a sound, not exactly. A memory, alive and whispering in her mind. "Don't wake it, June. Don't wake the black sun." The words echoed through the cavern, overlapping, twisting, until they weren't Mixon's anymore. Dozens of voices joined, whispering the same phrase in different tones, ages, languages, an underground chorus of warning and welcome. The creatures screamed without sound. The afterlight veins along the walls flared. The air vibrated so violently that Junie's teeth chattered. The crystal cracked with a low, resonant tone like a bell tolling in reverse. From above, the suspended creatures began to move. Not climbing, rising. Their tendrils stretched upward, fusing with the ceiling as if drawn by gravity reversed. Izzy fell to her knees, covering her ears. "Junie, what's happening?" Junie couldn't answer. The air was burning blue. The floor trembled as a shape unfolded in the center of the cavern, coalescing from shadow and light. A massive silhouette, humanoid only in outline, its surface rippling like liquid night. Its chest glowed with a swirling orb of afterlight. A black sun. It raised its head, or what passed for one, and for a moment Junie thought she saw eyes. Thousands of them, small and lidless, opening all at once across its body. The temperature dropped. The air froze in her lungs. "Mixon?" she whispered again, though she already knew it wasn't him anymore. The figure pulsed once, and the cavern roof split open. A shockwave of sound, felt not heard, rippled upward. Far above, somewhere in the streets of Ashcroft, windows shattered. Dogs howled. The river froze solid. Junie stumbled backward, dragging Izzy toward the tunnel. But the light followed. The suspended creatures fell one by one, their bodies disintegrating into dust that drifted upward instead of down, absorbed into the black sun's glow. The veins of afterlight began to surge up the walls, tracing back toward the surface like veins of lightning. The whole cavern seemed to breathe, expanding with each pulse. "Run!" Junie screamed. They bolted through the ruins, feet pounding against the trembling earth. Stone rained from above. A support beam snapped behind them. The sound of collapse was endless. Every shadow seemed alive, chasing them, whispering. And through it all, that voice inside her head, the dark was never empty. They reached the tunnel shaft just as the ground split. Izzy scrambled up the cable, hands bleeding, Junie close behind. The glow chased them upward, faster, hotter, until the metal beneath her palms began to burn. She bit down on a scream. The walls turned translucent. For a moment she could see the creatures moving within the stone itself, pressing against it like insects behind glass. She didn't look down again. They burst from the shaft into the upper tunnels, collapsing beside the rusted tracks. The glow below was blinding now, flooding every crevice. Izzy gasped, coughing dust. What do we do?" Junie turned toward the tunnel mouth leading back to the surface. "Get out," she said. "Warn them." They ran. Behind them, the roar built until it became silence, so loud it crushed all other sound. The light went black. When Junie opened her eyes, she was outside. Dawn, or what looked like it. The sky was a color she didn't recognize. Gray with a faint blue shimmer that pulsed, dimming and brightening like the afterlight. The town lay before them, quiet, perfectly still. But something was wrong. Every building leaned slightly inward, as if the earth beneath had sunk a few inches. Windows were spiderwebbed with cracks, but not broken. The trees stood motionless, their leaves humming faintly with that same impossible vibration. Izzy stirred beside her, groaning. "We made it, right?" Junie stared at the horizon. A faint blue glow seeped up from beneath the streets, tracing along cracks in the asphalt, spreading like veins beneath skin. And in the distance, toward the river bend, she saw a column of black smoke rising, but it didn't drift. It pulsed, a slow, steady rhythm, like a heartbeat. Junie stood. Her clothes were torn, her hair caked with dust, her face streaked with glowing residue. Somewhere far below she could still hear it, the pulse of the black sun echoing through the hollow bones of the world. The town hadn't been destroyed. It had changed. And as the first false sunlight crept over the horizon, every window in Ashcroft reflected the same impossible thing. Not the sun, but a dark, perfect circle, glowing faintly blue. Junie whispered, "It's awake." A sound answered her, a child's laugh, faint and distant, rising from the storm drain at her feet. Then silence.
Thanks for listening. Stay cozy, and I'll see you in the next story.